My name is Sherry, a 24-year-old office worker living alone. I have long been troubled by my relationship with my mom, who is not my biological mom but a stepmom to me. Her name is Kim. My biological mom passed away from illness when I was 7, and for a while, I lived with my paternal grandparents. However, 3 years later, when I was 10, my dad remarried, and we moved out of his parents' home to live as a family of 3 with Kim. That was when I met Kim. My dad seemed to think I was still a small child, but at 10, I could understand quite a bit. Even though he remarried, being suddenly told I had a new mom and being expected to call her mom was something I couldn't immediately accept, and I was just confused. However, Kim was kind to me. Often in TV and on the internet, relationships between stepmoms and their stepchildren are portrayed in a humorous or scandalous manner, and even around me, there were those who expected some soap opera-like drama, but it was nothing like that. Kim, who was 36 at the time, had met my dad through an acquaintance and was aware that he had a daughter, me, when they married. I had given up on marriage, but I longed for a family. So, I'm happy to have a daughter like you. She told me with tears in her eyes. Gradually, her delicious cooking and kindness thawed my heart, and before I knew it, I naturally began calling her mom. On the way home from a school visitation day, she smiled gently and said, "I heard someone mention that we kind of resemble each other. I guess when you spend a lot of time together, your faces start to look alike, and that really made me smile." I was thrilled to be told I resembled the beautiful and elegant Kim and felt proud of her. When I was 13, Kim got pregnant. Approaching 40 and having given up on having more kids, she was genuinely overjoyed. Honestly, seeing my dad and mom cry with happiness was a bit complex for me. Maybe because I had always been the only child and had been cherished, feelings of jealousy arose. But by then, I was a middle schooler, and neither my dad nor Kim neglected me, everything continued as before. So, I decided to cherish my new sibling and help as much as possible with housework and childcare. When I think like this, I imagine you were born from me. Then, I feel even more affection for you, and I'm glad I could come into this family. I'm sure this child will love you too. Despite the age gap, I'm hoping you two will bond as sisters, having fun conversations and taking adorable pictures in matching outfits alongside me," Kim said, caressing her large belly. She was imagining that I had come from her, that she was loving me as her own child. Wrapped in Kim's gentle momhood, I looked forward to the new family member's arrival. Kim's presence healed the loneliness of losing my real mom. I felt no inferiority or hesitation towards Kim. I thought this happiness would last forever. But everything began to crumble after the birth of Kim's biological child, my half-sister Michelle. Kim's attitude towards me gradually changed. She started avoiding me, responding indifferently when I spoke to her, and sometimes pretending not to hear me while she took care of the baby. She began to stop me from helping with diaper changes or putting the baby to sleep, and stopped letting me touch the baby. At first, I thought maybe she was just nervous because it was her first time raising a child, and there's such a thing as postpartum depression, so complaining might make her feel worse. But I didn't want her to bear it alone, so I worried about her and wanted to be supportive. However, Kim's attitude towards me didn't change, and eventually, we stopped even greeting each other. As Michelle started to toddle, Kim began to show off her affection for her in front of me. Around that time, my dad started to be away from home more often, sometimes not returning for several days. In the midst of puberty, I could only imagine negative reasons for his frequent overnight stays. My dad, who had been so devoted and kind, had changed. Kim, who had been known as a loving parent, no longer paid any attention to me. Why had things turned out like this? The house was filled with tension, and the screams of a tiny child echoed everywhere, a sound that still plays in my mind. One Sunday, while Kim and Michelle were out, Mr. Reed's sister, my aunt, who I hadn't seen since my dad remarried, suddenly visited. Surprised by her unexpected visit, I let her in. My impression of my aunt was of someone who loves flashy things, has a strong personality, and talks a lot. She was more of a meddler than having a good relationship with my dad, and I vaguely remember her interfering a lot during his remarriage. She still dressed flashily and talked a lot, telling me unsolicited that she had recently divorced and moved nearby to live alone. Sherry, you've grown up, haven't you? You look so mature. And how's that child? Almost 3 years old? Michelle, right? Are you two getting along well? I was puzzled and struggled to respond. My aunt seemed to sense something inside, saying, "Well, she looks kind, but she's pretty strong-willed. Do you know something?" I asked. My aunt sighed again. "It's hard to say, but I overheard something a long time ago. Kim said you were an unlovable brat and couldn't wait to have her own child. She planned to kick you out as soon as you were old enough and take all your dad's inheritance." What? When was this? Did you meet her? Well, that's not important. So, I've been worried about you. I thought that wicked woman might be doing something to you. And now that she has a child, I wanted to check on you sooner, but I had trouble with my ex-husband too. Oh, but it turned out like this, huh? Are you okay? No way, I can't believe this. That couldn't be true. Kim had been loving me like her own child. It's just that things aren't going well with my dad now. She's just tired from childcare. She's not that kind of person. I was confused, my thoughts swirling. You know, once you finish middle school, maybe you should go to a boarding high school and leave this house. It's for your own good. I'm really worried about you. I'm saying this because I care about you. You're my only niece. And that Michelle, she's the daughter of that evil woman. Who knows whose child she really is? It would be best for your dad to divorce her and come back to his parents' house. That would be the best for you and your dad. I really can't believe this. I'm sorry for bringing this up so suddenly, it must be shocking. But see, she's neglecting you at a difficult age and only doting on her own child, right? That's her true nature. She's always been like that. Poor thing, you've been deceived all along with your dad. No, that's not true, she's not that kind of person. My aunt shot me a pitying glance. While I was trying to figure things out, I was also super irritated by the never-ending insults aimed at Kim. Well, it's hard to believe that suddenly. But now, I'm close by. Saying that, my aunt took my mobile phone from the table without permission, dialed her number, and called. Now we both have each other's contact information, and I can keep an eye on you. It's reassuring. Call me anytime. I'll also contact you. Oh, and keep this a secret from Kim and your dad. It's better not to tell them. You never know what they might do. I was too shocked to see my aunt out. Coming suddenly and saying such things. In my mind, I kept seeing the kind Kim. It was unbelievable. But then, why did my aunt suddenly appear? Could what my aunt said be true, and she's really worried about me? With the terrible atmosphere at home, I could only think negatively. Still, I tried to believe it wasn't true, but after hearing my aunt's story, Kim's attitude seemed to get worse. Since that day, my aunt has been contacting me frequently. Are you okay? I'm worried about you, it's for your own good. Alone in the house, my aunt's kind words became my only solace. As I talked to my aunt more, Kim started to seem just like the person my aunt described, and I began to harbor hatred towards Kim. I wanted to leave this house quickly. My dad, who used to be so kind, was practically gone. Maybe choosing a faraway boarding high school, as my aunt suggested, is the best option. Yes, it must be. That's the only way to get away from that evil woman. When it came time to decide my career path, I was determined. No one opposed my decision to leave home. In fact, my dad seemed relieved, and Kim could barely hide her happiness. My 3-year-old sister, who Kim had kept away from me, was not attached to me at all. After deciding my path, my relationship with Kim deteriorated even further. On the day I left home, a completely transformed Kim confronted me at the entrance and said, "After all, my own blood is dear to me. I'm sick of living with a stranger. There's no reason I should take care of someone else's burden. Now, just leave already." I had heard plenty from my aunt, but it was the first time I heard it from Kim herself. Seeing her disdainful eyes, I was no longer surprised. This is our first conversation in a long time, and it's this? I have no interest in being taken care of by strangers either. I'll gladly leave. Please take care. Thus, Kim and I parted, harboring the worst feelings towards each other. I graduated from high school and moved to Boston for college, starting my life alone. That year, I learned from my aunt that my dad and Kim had divorced. Kim had left with my sister, and my dad had returned to his parents' home. I wasn't surprised by the divorce, but I felt pity for my dad who Kim had abandoned, and my hatred towards her deepened. One day, on my way home from a part-time job at the age of 20, I met someone by chance. We stared at each other for a few seconds, feeling a sense of familiarity but unable to recall immediately. Could it be Sherry? Triggering childhood memories, I responded. Uncle? It was my aunt's ex-husband, Mr. Reed. I remembered him as a kind, child-loving person who used to play with me when I was little. Although I felt a simple nostalgia, Mr. Reed, with a serious look, said, "Meeting here must mean something. Can we talk a bit?" And invited me to a cafe nearby. Mr. Reed revealed a shocking truth that threatened to destroy everything I had believed in the past few years. Given that he was my aunt's ex-husband, essentially a stranger, he might have had some ulterior motive. Feeling the need to verify his story, I secretly visited my hometown every weekend without telling my dad or aunt. The more I investigated, the more it became clear that what Mr. Reed had said was true, and my resentment shifted. I hope the number hasn't changed, I thought, as I mustered the courage to make a call. Once I understood everything, I worked multiple part-time jobs to support myself financially, aside from my living expenses. After that, I found a job in Boston and was now 24 years old. It had taken a long time, but now that I was prepared, I was considering going home when I received news that my dad had collapsed, prompting me to immediately head to my hometown. On the train, I reflected on the days spent at my family home. For years had passed since I heard the truth from Mr. Reed, and I had always wanted to confront that person. But perhaps this was my only chance. Upon arriving at the station, I took out my phone and made a call. My dad, lying in the hospital bed, smiled kindly when he saw me. Dad. I was shocked to see my dad so thin and different, and tears involuntarily welled up. The doctor said his condition wasn't serious, and he would be discharged in a few days, which made me cry again. That was quick. Turning towards the voice, I saw my aunt standing there. The smile on her face as she spoke made me furious, and I resolved to settle things. I have something important to discuss with you. What's wrong? You look serious. What is it? Since this is a hospital, let's go to Dad's family home. Dad, I'll come back after we're done. With that, I led my aunt out and we took a taxi to my grandparents' house. During the ride, I sent an email to someone. My grandparents, who had visited my dad in the morning, had returned home early and welcomed me warmly. However, I wasn't just there for a visit, I had to tell my grandparents the truth too. Well, this child says she has something important to discuss. I wonder what it could be. As my aunt spoke carelessly, unaware of anything, the doorbell rang. I stopped my aunt from answering and went to the door myself to welcome the visitor. What? Why are you here? The visitor was Kim, whom I had not seen in 8 years. Her expression was different from when we last parted, tired yet somehow gentler. Kim, Dad, and I were all manipulated and deceived by your lies, leading to our family's destruction. You know what I'm talking about, right? Huh? What are you talking about? What nonsense. Your former husband, Mr. Reed, told me you have a habit of stretching the truth. My aunt had a habit of lying, and those lies had deteriorated her relationships with others. Mr. Reed had divorced her because her lies had jeopardized his position at work and caused misunderstandings among friends. Exhausted, Mr. Reed had paid compensation and left, even though it meant being misunderstood as the bad guy. Ideally, he should have cut off all ties, but knowing our family's collapse, he sensed my aunt's involvement. Though they were technically strangers post-divorce, he felt compelled to inform me when we met by chance in town. To verify this, I secretly investigated my aunt. As expected, many people harbored resentment against her, but no one defended her. You filled Kim with the idea that she was awful, told her I hated her, and told Dad that he saw Kim as nothing more than a maid. You told Dad that Kim had abandoned her parenting duties to fool around with young men, didn't you? What? No, I didn't say that. Playing dumb is pointless. I thought Dad had another woman because he wasn't coming home. But actually, you divorced and had no money, so you begged him to work night shifts after his job, and you took that money, right? What? Money? I don't know anything about that. You've been demanding money from us because our part-time jobs aren't enough. No. As the years of lies crumbled, my aunt continued to deny everything while avoiding eye contact. You want to make me the villain? If you're going to accuse me of such, then show me the proof. You probably don't have any, do you? What can a young girl like you do? Understood. You want proof. I spread documents from an envelope on the table. They were photos of my aunt going from one nightclub to another, high-value promissory notes, and audio recordings of testimonies from people she had harmed, obtained with their consent. My part-time jobs during my student days were worth it. If this isn't enough, all the people you've wronged are ready to come here and testify. Shall I call them now? These things? They're not evidence at all. As she spoke, my aunt started to destroy the documents and data in front of her, tearing them apart like a madwoman, revealing her true nature. I slammed my hand on the table and looked straight into her eyes. Kim has been struggling to raise Michelle alone since divorcing Dad. Despite that, she's been suffering because of the lies you continued to spread. I can't forgive the person who broke her heart looking so unremorseful. Tears welled up in my frustration, but I held them back and said, "After doing all this, what did you want to achieve?" Then my aunt glared at Kim with wide eyes. "It's all your fault. When Sherry's mom was gone, I thought my brother would finally come back to me. But he remarried someone like you. My brother was supposed to be mine. He said he would marry his big sister when he was little. But then Sherry was born, and because of what people would think, I was forced into an arranged marriage. All I needed was my brother. Despite my efforts to drive you and Sherry away. And yet, he kept lamenting every day, feeling sorry for you and Sherry, making me wonder what all my efforts had been for." I was speechless for a moment at my aunt's words. In addition to being a pathological liar, she had an abnormal obsession with my dad. While my aunt was breaking down in tears, Kim, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "You preyed on my tiredness from parenting and Sherry's vulnerabilities during her unstable teenage years, pushing us into an irreparable situation. That is unforgivable. Do you love Sherry's dad? I don't think so. You only love yourself. If not, you wouldn't have hurt so many people." Her tone was calm, but her eyes conveyed a strong resolve. "What right do you have to act so high and mighty? If our relationship could be destroyed over something like this, it was bound to break eventually anyway. We were never a real family. Just a stepmom, always a stepmom." My aunt shouted, but I stood beside Kim and stated firmly, "This is my mom, and I am her daughter." A few days later, my dad was safely discharged from the hospital. My grandparents had always been troubled by my aunt's lies since my childhood, but their desire to believe in their only daughter had prevailed. However, they admitted their own responsibility for indulging her without properly confronting the issues and promised to get her psychiatric help. But my aunt, unable to accept her deep-seated issues, finally broke down completely. She began to scream mine and Kim's names day and night outside our house and eventually was admitted to a distant hospital. My grandparents sold their house and moved near the hospital where my aunt was being treated. And then, I reunited with Kim, my dad, and my now 11-year-old sister Michelle. After the divorce, I believed her lies and resented you, regretting my marriage. But as I worked and met different people, I began to sense that something was off, and I started to distrust her. When I got a call from you, Sherry, everything clicked. You said we should uncover her lies together and escape from the repercussions they caused. That's when I found the courage. Kim spoke with tears in her eyes. My dad apologized, crying. I feel ashamed that I couldn't stand up to my sister and just followed her, ashamed that I failed to believe in and protect my family. I'm so sorry. Then Kim gently placed her hand on my dad's shoulder. It's all right now. I couldn't believe in you either. Sure, life was tough, but we managed because of the money you sent. Michelle is healthy now, and I'm grateful for that. What? My dad looked confused, and Kim tilted her head. Actually, about that. I revealed everything. After hearing from Mr. Reed and investigating the facts, I learned that Kim, still suffering from my aunt's manipulation, was working desperately to pay for Michelle's medical treatments due to a chronic illness. I increased my part-time jobs and began sending money under my dad's name, which I continued even after I started communicating with Kim. Why didn't you tell me? Kim was shocked. Because. I struggled to explain coherently, my words fragmented as I attempted to convey my reasons. I thought you might feel more humiliated if you knew the money came from me, after such a terrible breakup. The biggest victim here is you, Kim, and Michelle is innocent. Despite my dislike, that woman is still technically my aunt, and I felt a responsibility. If it was from Dad, you could accept it as compensation. I thought it might help you recover faster if Michelle got better, considering I also contributed to driving you into a corner. I had no idea. And after all the hardships you faced. Saying this, Kim covered her face with her hands and cried. My dad promised to support Kim and Michelle from now on and offered to repay the money I had sent, but I refused since it was my decision. He declared his estrangement from my aunt and broke down crying. Time passed, and we now meet once a month for a meal. Dad and Kim, along with Michelle, meet once or twice a week. Reconciling fully isn't simple, but they've discussed taking slow steps toward each other. I've started communicating with Michelle via emails and video calls. Initially confused, she now calls me by my name or calls me Big Sister. Seeing her smile innocently, so much like Kim, I feel genuinely happy about her presence. She's about the age I was when my dad remarried. I hope she never experiences what I did. I want to be someone who can protect her. That day, we were again gathered around a table at a restaurant. No one spoke of my aunt anymore, but suddenly Kim murmured while staring at her ringless ring finger. Perhaps the fact that we were so easily swayed by such lies and couldn't fully trust each other means we were never truly a family. Memories flooded back at her words. My aunt was a scary person. She knew exactly when to strike. But we overcame that, I believe. Kim nodded slightly and smiled. I decided to say what I had long wanted to. May I call you Mom again? Kim looked surprised at first, but then tears started to flow. I'm so happy. I never forgot about you. After everything I said, do you still think of me as your mom? As we looked at each other, tears rolled down my cheeks. Your love saved me then. You are my mom. Thank you. Thank you. Mom. It's been a long journey, and it will take more time. But in whatever form, I believe we can be a true family. Sherry, Mom. Michelle teared up and joined my and Kim's hands. After a good cry, we looked at each other and laughed. So, who's paying for this? I looked at Kim and Michelle, and all three of us said to Dad. Thank you for the meal. Dad nodded with a happy smile. The scene of us laughing together felt like a return to the old days. Now with Michelle here, Kim's smile was just like before, a kind mom's face. Mom. I had started calling her that again, and whenever I talked about her to someone else, I referred to her not as Kim but as my mom.